For many players, sports games were once a cornerstone of gaming. Annual releases felt exciting because hardware generations changed rapidly, graphics improved dramatically from year to year, and entirely new gameplay systems were introduced on a regular basis. During the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 eras especially, yearly sports titles often contained meaningful improvements, new physics engines, expanded franchise modes, improved presentation packages, commentary teams, and major graphical leaps helped justify annual purchases. Sports games also served as social experiences. Local multiplayer, couch co-op tournaments with friends, and online leagues gave these titles longevity beyond simply recreating a real-world sport. For younger players, sports games often acted as gateways into gaming as a whole. Someone who loved football or basketball in real life could jump into gaming through familiar teams and athletes before branching into other genres of games. So I can remember just from my childhood, because that's exactly how I started playing video games. I would buy the new 2K that year, or my father would buy it, and then we would play it together. He'd beat me mercilessly, and then eventually I got better and better at it, and then I would start to beat him. But that led to me getting into other types of games. I started to play Call of Duty. I started to play Dragon Ball Z. I started to play single player games like Infamous 2, Infamous, the original Infamous. I started playing Mortal Kombat. That just led to me branching out into other types of games because the sports game served as a funnel just to get me into gaming in general. And from there, I was able to just spread my wings, so to speak, and branch out to other genres of the game. I remember playing with friends after school. We'd come home, we'd fire up 2K or fire up Madden. Never been a big football guy, but I would play it just to appease them. And it was just a fun time. The simplicity of it all. We were unaware of how, I guess, not revolutionary, but how unique sports gaming was back then, because they actually seemed like they made jumps and there were actual definitive steps that they had taken forward year to year, as opposed to more just the same copy and pasted slop after the year after same year. So it just served holistically as an entry point into gaming. It was fun to play with your friends. They provided great memories, and they just felt very exciting back then as opposed to how they feel now. Now, obviously, with good, there's bad, and the bad in this case was the shift towards annualized products. Over time, many players began noticing that yearly sports releases offered fewer revolutionary improvements and more incremental updates. Updated rosters, slight graphical refinements, new menus, and presentation changes increasingly became the primary selling points of new entries. The yearly release cycle itself creates challenges for developers, building a fundamentally new experience every 12 months while also licensing players, teams, stadiums, commentators, and maintaining online services is incredibly difficult, I would imagine. As development costs increased, publishers began relying more heavily on recurring revenue models, digital currencies, and card collecting game modes that encourage ongoing spending beyond the initial purchase price, which is microtransactions, which is something that gamers is an entirely different conversation aside from this. The modern sports game business model increasingly resembles a live service platform rather than a traditional video game sequel. So the question arises where you ask, am I buying a new game or am I just buying a roster update? Because that's essentially what I felt like as I got older. Back when I was younger, I was just buying it to buy it. Didn't really pay much attention to anything. If I saw the game, I had even a remote interest in it, I would purchase it. But as you get older, you start to ask yourselves these questions. What am I actually paying for? Where's the true value in this? How can I justify this purchase year after year? And that's essentially what I felt like. I was just buying a roster update just to see, oh, LeBron's playing here now. Oh, this player is traded here, or this is here. I'm just essentially buying the game for updated rosters. That's what I perceived it as. So it seemed like we got to a point, at least I did specifically, you get to a point where there are diminishing returns. You're investing year after year, your investment being your hard-earned money, into this gaming development company who produces these yearly annualized games, but you're not really getting much back. It's the same sport, it's the same mechanics. You already know the controls before it gets there. It's not like it's something new or something novel. The only new novelty about it is the fact that there are roster changes or that there are things that shake up the league. But these are things that you really like to ponder and watch and see unfold in the real world. You don't necessarily need to tackle it in a video game format. So it just seems kind of redundant, so to speak, and it's at that point where it's just diminished returns. Another thing with annual releases is that it kind of conflicts with an artistic vision. Because if you have some grandiose scheme for innovation for your title, this isn't even just something confined to sports games and the sports genre. But if you want to innovate in some other genre or anything, if you constrain yourself to just that yearly time frame, well, now you have to rush the quality of your work just to hit that deadline. And I don't think I've ever seen an annualized game be delayed, whether it's Call of Duty, whether it's Madden, 2K, UFC, whatever. I don't think I've ever seen it be delayed. So there may have been times in those boardrooms, in those conferences where they're making these games and are like, hey, let's try this, let's do this. And then someone in the room is like, nah, that's going to take too long because we need to release this game by next year. So it's kind of counterproductive when it comes to appeasing your audience and when it comes to being innovative and actually being different and incentivizing people to keep purchasing your products long term. But then again, people are concerned with the almighty green, so they're not necessarily going to abide by that. They just want to keep getting this game out and out and out and out, not realizing that if you just took a couple years to innovate it and maybe make it a completely different experience, you might actually make more money in the long run. And then there's the live service effect. We're not even going to get into that, but that's just something that I think a lot of people are delving more into nowadays, and I just don't see the appeal in it. The live service, the online multiplayer, it just doesn't seem as if it's as fruitful as these developers wish it could be. But a lot of game creators are taking that route nowadays, and I think that is something in and of itself that also disincentivizes people to purchase these annualized games. Now, one of the largest changes in sports gaming was the rise of collectible team building modes that encourage players to continuously chase new cards and players. These modes became enormously profitable because they create recurring spending opportunities long after launch passes. As these systems grew in popularity, some players felt that franchise modes, career modes, and offline experiences received less attention than they once did. This shift mirrors broader industry trends toward player retention, engagement metrics, battle passes, and recurring monetization systems. So as I was writing the script, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I thought, man, I really kind of hit the nail on the head with that one, because it seemed like sports games, they stopped feeling like games and they started feeling more like ecosystems. I remember the days when you could fire up 2K on the Xbox 360 and you could just play basketball. That's all it was. But nowadays, the last 2K I played was like 2K20, I think. That's when I stopped buying it. And I remember even back then, I can only imagine what it is now. They had all these other modes like the park, and you have to purchase the PlayStation Plus online membership just to engage in certain things. You gotta do this particular thing just so you can buy certain products in the NBA stores. You can get your player correct. And it's just, they just added all these other metrics into it that kind of made it more complex than it needed to be. Man, it's just basketball. Just have them go shoot basketball. Why am I paying an online subscription service just so I can play basketball in the park here with other guys who are also online playing 2K? Just let me play basketball. I can't play against a computer or something. But I think that it just became less of a focus for the offline players. And majority of people are going to be offline players because only a minority of gamers in the overall population of the gaming community are people who have monthly subscriptions, who pay for online services, who pay for PlayStation Plus, who pay for, I don't remember what the Xbox One is as a Game Pass, and people who pay for Nintendo Online. That's only a minority of the gaming population. So the much larger scope are people who play online. People who play offline. Just casual players just on there getting their fix of sports, getting their fix of whatever genre that game is. They don't necessarily want to engage with other people, but they kind of disincentivize that group of people, the offline gamer, from wanting to pick up these products, which I think is pretty crazy and stupid from a business sense and from a common sense perspective, because these are the majority of your consumers. So why would you ostracize the majority of your consumers if you truly do care about your money and push this live service and this multiplayer and these online subscriptions? It's kind of senseless to me, but perhaps this is just some sort of business model that I don't fully comprehend. Actually, I know for a fact I don't fully comprehend it because I'm not the one making these games, but it just seems kind of counterproductive all in all. It's you're chasing cards versus playing basketball or playing football. I mean, that's why we're buying these games, right? At least that's why I did buy them, because I wanted to play that particular sport that game is about. But they add all these other things in here, and people were actually buying them because they, as I just said, these cards, this system thing that they had aside from the actual career modes, they were very profitable. So it just seems like it's a overall issue with engagement over enjoyment when it comes to these games. People are engaged in it, like, oh, I'm buying these cards, or I'm playing this game, or I'm doing this online run because I need to advance the story. But are you actually enjoying the experience? I know for a fact when I was doing it, I sure did it, and that's why I stopped buying them. And then there's something I dub the Kobe Bryant exception. Sometimes games become more than products. They become tributes to athletes who had a major cultural impact. Purchasing a special edition featuring a legendary athlete can feel less like buying a video game and more like owning a collectible or a commemorative piece. For many basketball fans, certain players represented an era of sports fandom that may never fully return. So what I mean by this specifically is that, as I mentioned, the last 2K that I actually played was 2K20. That was the time I stopped playing 2K because, if you remember, it was in that year that Kobe died. So fast forward a few years later, I bought 2K24, but the only reason I bought it is because he was on the cover. because obviously one of his jersey numbers that I retired, one of his two jerseys is number 24. I bought it for, I think I bought it digitally for PS5. I either bought it digitally or I have the physical PS4 version. I'm pretty sure it's digital in my PlayStation library. And after he passed, it just felt, just sports in general, I felt, why am I even buying these? Why am I playing? Do I really care and hold this thing in such a high regard that I need to keep buying it year after year? I'm not trying to downplay, because there's a lot of guys who really love sports, but I really view that stuff as sort of not mindless entertainment, but just slave-minded entertainment, if for lack of a better word, because there's so much people who love sports. There's so much people who are enamored with these athletes and these things, and I don't really have an interest in playing a game or watching a sport where other people have accomplished their dreams, where I'm trying to still accomplish mine, because it kind of takes away from me pursuing the things I want to achieve. And though it's just an hour or two at the end of the day or whatever to watch a game, but I just don't see the appeal to it anymore. After he passed, I just don't care anymore. So when I bought the game, even though I don't play it, it felt more like memorabilia than entertainment, because I lost all sense of entertainment for it. And that purchase just marked the end of an era for me, where I'm like, you know what? I don't even care about these games anymore. The reason why I would even buy it, the reason why I liked basketball was because of him. The reason why I liked the Lakers was because of him. And he's not here anymore. And then couple that with the fact that I kind of am growing increasingly disinterested with sports in general. So seems like the perfect juncture to take my leave from these type of games in this genre. Now, there are going to be people who don't like that. There are going to be people who still subscribe to playing sports games. Bro, do you? I'm not knocking you. I'm just telling you why I don't play them and why I think it's kind of stupid to keep buying them year after year. But that more or less sums up my perspective in regards to why I stopped playing them, and one of the motivating factors for why I did what I did. I also think as we age and we grow older, that kind of changes how we play video games. As players age, gaming preferences often evolve. Limited free time means many players become more selective about where they invest dozens or hundreds of hours. Narrative games, action titles, RPGs, and challenging single-player experiences offer something annualized sports titles often struggle to provide: surprise. A great single-player game introduces new worlds, mechanics, characters, stories, ideas. Every experience feels unique and self-contained, whereas sports games, by their nature, recreate the same rules and environments repeatedly. While this consistency appeals to dedicated fans, it may feel repetitive to players seeking novelty. I was alluding to this earlier when I was saying that there is no novelty when it comes to buying annualized products in general, because you're expecting the same shit year after year with minimal improvements. This kind of reminds me, I just had this thought, it's pretty random, but you know when we watch things like SpongeBob and you see how Squidward is just perpetually in this bad mood and he hates his life and he always gives SpongeBob a hard time. Well, that's because he's an adult. As we age, we become more mature, we become more responsible, we take on more responsibility, and we have limited time to engage in the things that we actually had interest in. When it came to Squidward, he likes to play his clarinet. He likes to pursue music. He likes to do things of that nature. He likes to just lounge around and just chill out. He doesn't want to be bothered. But as you age, your obligations take away from these things by nature of you being an adult. So when these things happen, your time becomes far more valuable. So when that is pertaining to a game session, you don't necessarily want to play a sports game because there's no novelty there, there's no surprise, there's nothing of which you can't already expect or you won't already expect, because you get the same shit every year. Whereas when you play something like Elden Ring, something like God of War, something like The Last of Us, some sort of story-based game, there can be surprise there. And there's multiple different games like that. It's entirely different genre outside of the sports thing. So I think that's why people gravitate towards these types of games more so than people who gravitate towards annualized products and sports games. So you look more for experiences instead of routines as you get older, because you already have cemented routines. You want to be able to sort of divert from that when possible, because that's all your life is routine. Go to bed, wake up, go to work, come home, prepare for the next day, do it all over again. That's what your life is. Every Souls game feels different. Every sports game feels familiar. Now, if I had to kind of try to come up with some sort of justification as why single player games feel more meaningful, I think it's because these games, they frequently become cultural moments that players remember for years or decades to come. Players often remember specific bosses, story moments, characters, and locations long after completing these games. I still think about Mikula's Halig Tree and the first time I'm fighting Millennia. By comparison, sports titles often blend together over time because their identities are tied primarily to yearly seasons rather than unique creative visions. This doesn't make sports games bad, it simply means they serve a different purpose for different audiences. Some players want simulation and familiarity, others want discovery and immersion. I remember bosses. I remember the first time I fought Baldur in God of War 2018, which was my first God of War experience. I remember fighting Millennia in Elden Ring. I remember getting my butt kicked by Malekith. I remember fighting in Infamous 2 when you're going up against the final boss. I remember in Ghost of Tsushima when you're fighting Khotun Khan. I remember all of that stuff. I remember the stories in God of War. I remember how we have to go spread the mother's ashes in the highest peak in the realms. I remember in Ghost of Tsushima you go against your samurai code to free your land. I remember in Infamous 2, you get your powers in this explosion and you become a conduit. I remember this stuff. I remember the worlds. I remember the Norse mythology. I remember how you're in New Moray. I remember how you're in Japan. You're in the different prefectures. I don't remember what separated one yearly release from another when it came to 2K. I don't remember that at all. What, there's a different athlete on the cover? Okay, it's the same shit year after year. But what these other experiences, these single player games or just games of other genres, they stand out. They're unique. They give you incentives to keep playing over and over again, whereas annualized products, they lack that. So I guess this video culminates in the question of, are sports games becoming obsolete? For some consumers, especially casual sports fans, subscription services and roster updates may eventually replace annual purchases entirely anyway. A future where sports games become persistent platforms with seasonal updates rather than full-price yearly releases appears increasingly plausible. Other genres moved away from yearly sequels years ago, allowing developers more time to innovate and deliver substantial improvements. Sports games may eventually face pressure to adopt similar models if consumers begin questioning the value proposition of annual releases, which I don't think they're going to do because they've been making these games since I was born. So my thought would be, why not release a game every 5 years? Maybe every 3 years. Give yourself time to actually showcase the quality of life improvements and the strides that you have made when it came to changing your game, as opposed to just year-to-year changes where the UI is essentially the same, but there are just small, minuscule tweaks and adjustments that you made to try to make it stand out. I don't think it's a selling point anymore because, as I just literally explicitly mentioned, they just want to tweak the UI. Forget about the menus. Actually improve the gameplay, make the graphics more sharp, make it actually feel more realistic. Utilize that Unreal Engine. Utilize all the tools that you have at your disposal as opposed to just copy and pasting the same thing year after year. So it just really makes me ask, is the annual model sustainable? Now, I'm conflicted because I want to say no, it's not, but at the same time, proof of concept is, I think, the better justifier than anything, because as what we're seeing in real time is that they're still making these games. So clearly there's still an audience for it, and clearly still people are still purchasing and buying it. Now, I'm not advocating for them to stop doing it because there are people who like those games. But what I just don't see is the developers just don't seem to have that much of a care when it comes to these sports games because they just want to get it out year after year. Now, you could make the same argument for things like Call of Duty, but they have a far larger and far more loyal, I think, community than sports games do, because sports games are very niche. They're very niche, in my opinion. But when it comes to Call of Duty, that's not just the Call of Duty brand, that's the first-person shooter genre in general. So I think there are far more people who would want to play a first-person shooter game than there are people who want to play a sports game, because sports, I think, are very niche. As I said, there are people who consider their hobbies and their pastimes. People would rather play a game of a sport than actually go outside and start playing it, especially if the weather or certain things in their lives do not optimize that opportunity for them. So I just consider all these questions where I'm conflicted, like, okay, they're not going to stop making these games annually. And at the same time, why would they? Because people keep buying them. So it's just an interesting topic and an interesting question to ponder. To be real, maybe I've changed more than sports games have. Maybe sports games still serve exactly the audience they were designed for, but somewhere along the way, I stopped wanting to recreate seasons and started wanting to experience worlds. I stopped wanting updated rosters and started wanting unforgettable memories. Today, give me a Souls game, an action RPG, a narrative experience, or something completely new. Just don't ask me to buy the same game again next September. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments, whether we agree or disagree. I know this topic kind of came out of left field, but I thought, let's make something on this, even though I'm sure there are several and there's a plethora of different videos about this already. I still wanted to make my own version of it. So, I'm Harlem. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.